Hello everyone, I'm Dead Knight and this is In It to Win It. Today we are going to talk about Season 90 and my Legend run. So I hit Legend with the Questline Mage. So I know some people are probably rolling their eyes at that, but honestly, even after the nerf of Incanter's Flow from 2 mana to 3 mana, this is still a really solid deck. And much like I said in my last video on Questline Mage, this is still a meta-defining deck, even if it is not necessarily the strongest win rate in the meta. So let's get to it. I'm not going to waste too much time on the concept of this because I already covered that in another video, but I do want to go over the particulars of this list and a little bit of the strategy here. So now that the meta has matured a little bit and there's been some nerfs and some balancing, the meta is kind of mostly kind of coalesced around decks that are not so extreme anymore. So when this Questline Mage deck was really abusive at the beginning of the United and Stormwind set, people were just not playing any minions. They were finding ways to not put minions in their deck because it would help this deck complete the questline faster, and they would just get punished for playing minions. The thing is, they still get punished for playing minions. This deck is just absolutely savage on early game board control and punishing minions. But there are so many decks in the meta that play minions now that this deck is starting to thrive again. So the scales are starting to tilt back in favor of this deck. The thing you have to be careful for is the types of minions people are playing. So almost every single deck is running Cult Neophyte right now, which you really have to watch out for, and it can really stifle your game plan. But in general, you want to watch who your opponent is and mulligan appropriately. Almost always you're going to want to hard mulligan for Incanter's Flow because it's just so good. But if you're playing against a deck that is going to put a lot of minions on the board early, like if you see Priest or if you see Paladin, any of those decks are going to be running lots of early game minions. Even Druid, I would play it safe, and just in case it is Oracle Druid, you want to still hedge on that and keep your early removal in the mulligan. So, but the most important thing that you need to think about is what are you going to do when your opponent isn't playing minions because they choose not to indulge your quest line, or because they're just running a deck that is very low on minions like Questline Hunter. So what do? In this deck, your best bet is to play Apexis Blast, and then so you want to save your Apexis Blast for when you have Brain Freeze, typically, because frost spells are the hardest ones to play without minions on the board. And also you want to just time your Apexis Blast around when you can destroy your own minion. Because when you think about decks that are not putting minions on the board, they're slower and they're often relying on you to play minions. So you can finish that off by getting an Apexis Blast to their face, dealing some damage, and then clearing your own minion with Brain Freeze and First Flame to move that quest line forward. Now, if your opponent is playing minions, typically the decks that are running minions right now are still very aggressive, like those Shadow Priests and Druid decks I was talking about, but then there's also decks that have minions that are very difficult to remove. So think about Scab's Rogue, where most of the minions have stealth, and Hand Buff Paladin, where the minions often have Divine Shield, are overly buffed for their mana cost. So you're looking at multiple spells to remove. So how I solved that problem was Devolving Missiles. Devolving Missiles was awesome when it came out a year ago in Skullmance. People kind of let it fall off because decks were just so aggressive that you needed that damage. But now I think Devolving Missiles is really shining. So when Rogue is trying to set up for those stealth massive swing damage turns with, they'll complete their quest, they'll play Scabs, they'll give it stealth, and then next turn, they're going to play that Battlegrounds Battlemaster and try to just haymaker you for 20-something damage stealth minions. Well, you can get around that with Devolving Missiles. So you devolve that stealth minion into a manageable, cheap minion that you can just blow away. Same thing with Hand Buff Paladin. They put out a 4/9 Blade Master Samuro that's really hard to remove, and You know, you say to yourself, well, here comes the Conviction and the Battlegrounds Battlemaster, and they're going to just, you know, again, mow me over for 20. Devolving Missiles, turn that guy into a 1/1 and just clear him off. So I think that Devolving Missiles is really slept on here, and it can help you in both those situations. Another thing that it really helps you with is Raise Dead, because Raise Dead is going to be often returning Cult Neophytes, because that's how they can slow you down and get in the way of you completing your quests while still playing minions. So if they play Cult Neophyte and then you remove it and then they raise it back and play it again, you know, you could be dealing with up to 6 Cult Neophytes a game, which you're probably going to lose. But if instead of killing it, you devolve it into a Desk Imp, now you're in pretty good shape. So you don't have to worry about 2 Cult Neophytes. So Devolving Missiles, I think, is really strong here. And even though there's times where it's sitting in my hand because I can't play it because I'm playing against a mirror match, for example, then you know, when you do finally get to play it, it's extremely inexpensive. Often it can be reduced to 0 with Incanter's Flow, and it can really help you advance that quest quickly. One more final thing about Devolving Missiles. If your opponent has been holding off on playing minions and then they finally do, and there's 1 minion on the board that they just absolutely had to play, you can first Brain Freeze it or Flurry it, then you can devolve it, and then you can first flame it, and you can get a whole branch of your quest line done off 1 minion, which there aren't any other arcane spells that target minions that don't deal damage the way Devolving Missiles does. So huge card. I really like it, and I would expect it to get some traction once some of these other decks start to come forward. I do also want to talk about some variations you can play. If you see a lot of mirror match or a lot of people holding out on playing minions, there's a couple things you can do. So firstly, you can trade out your Apexis Blasts for Wand Thief. That way you can get a cheap minion that helps you discover spells, and then as soon as you play that Wand Thief for 1 mana, you can just Brain Freeze it or, you know, deliver some damage to your own cheap minion. And typically, because Apexis Blast costs 5, that's a little harder to set up where you create a minion and destroy it. But Wand Thief only costs 1, and it lets you discover a spell to help you smooth out your curve. The only reason why I don't run Wand Thief is because the Refreshing Spring Water, if it hits the Wand Thief and you were really counting on that mana, then you lose out on 2 mana and can end your turn. So that's really bad. But you know, the odds of that happening are pretty low if all your only minions are 2 Wand Thief. But you know, I used to play Druid, and I would like somehow always manage to Fungal Fortunes away my minions. So I just have really bad luck with that. I don't want to run Wand Thief. Another thing you can do, which I have not tried, but I saw a mage play it against me, and it worked out really well for that guy, was Magtheridon. So this is a super sneaky play. I really love the concept of it, but I haven't tried it out yet. So Magtheridon is going to create 3 1/3 acolytes for your opponent, which you can then just just set up bullseyes on their back and just blast them with your minion targeting spells, and you know, that will help you complete the quest. And while you're at it, completing that quest, you also get to clear the board and put a 12/12 into play. Well, also you're messing up their Raised Deads, and so it's a really cool idea. And if you're having trouble completing the quest line because people aren't playing minions, this is a great way to force minions onto their board and also put a 12/12 in play in the process while removing the rest of the board. So it's a really cool idea. It might catch on. I was able to hit Legend without it, but you know, we'll see how it goes. Ultimately, you know, this deck, even with the Incanter's Flow nerf, is still super viable. It's super fun to play. You often get to play tons of spells in one turn, which it feels really cool to play. It's got really great Warcraft flavor, where you know, you're slinging spells, and you know, as you go through the quest line, you can kind of imagine yourself, you know, freeing scabs from the stockades, and then, you know, doing something epic once you get to the other side. So, you know, from a flavor, a fun, and you know, viability standpoint, this is a great deck. It worked out really well for me. Tell me what you think about Mage, what your experience has been, and you know, what it's like now that the Incanter's Flow nerf is in. Leave some respectful comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and tune in next time.